On behalf of Windsor and the JEDI Committee, the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, we're really grateful that you have taken this little bit of time on this important day to be together in this place. I'm the community liaison. My name is Karen Lipinczyk, and I have just a few brief remarks to make. We have 4 speakers, and then following their reflections and insights, we will light candles and hear the names of 31 of our sisters and brothers who have died in the last year. So you all know, and I don't need to say it, that this is an unprecedented time of threat and danger as we confront the incoming administration. Just yesterday, the newly elected representative from Delaware, the first transgender person to serve in our national legislature, was, of course, threatened. And then today, the House Speaker has to call a special press conference to make clear where he stands. But today we gather to remember our trans brothers and sisters, to remember that bias and hate will not rule the day. We gather to share sorrow and fear, but also really just to be with each other in solidarity and community. So you probably know that in 1999, Gwendolyn Ann Smith began the Trans Day of Remembrance to memorialize a friend and activist, Rita Hester, a trans woman who was killed in 1998. And then there's Monica Helms, these not so very well-known saints of activism and movements. She was a 1970 naval enlistee who knew that she had been born in the wrong body. When she was reassigned to San Francisco, she was able to entertain more fully who she was, and initially began doing that by dressing up as a woman and going to the clubs. But because it was San Francisco, she was able to move past that into fully embracing her reality as a transgender woman. She landed in Georgia, in 2003, and became the director of an advocacy organization, Trans Equal Action. And in 2003, she co-founded the Transgender American Veterans Association. With support of the designer of the bisexual pride flag, Monica designed the transgender flag, which, if you know it, is, I think, blue, pink, white, pink, blue. And what she said about that flag is, no matter which way you fly it, it's always correct. Those are 2 saints of the movement, if you will. Just 2 transgender heroes. And really, everything always starts there with 1 or 2 or 10. And then there's a movement. And so tonight we're going to hear from some of our local heroes on this important day. So I would first invite Emma Caffrey to speak. Emma is on our select board and is the liaison to JEDI. And we're lucky to have you, crazy woman that you are, in our community.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you everybody for coming out tonight. I'm very happy to see so many faces. There are, to kind of echo some of what Karen was saying, there's a lot of people that I really love that I don't agree with, and there's people that I love that I don't understand, and there's people that I love that don't believe the same things that I believe in. And after the last election in the last couple of weeks, some of those people that I don't necessarily agree with came to me and they were saying, "What are you really afraid of, and what do you really think is going to happen?" And I said, "I'm afraid that the wrong kind of person is going to become very brave." And I think that's something that we might see, and that's something that I think we are seeing. And I think that what I can say and what I can do today is be here with y'all, and also to speak to the allies in this group and say, what can you do? Is you can be there and you can be brave, and there's a door that's kind of been opened for some people to do not great things. And so what we need to do as allies and as people that are brave enough to be here today is to open a door ourselves and maybe shove it open and put your foot in the door and say, "I don't think that joke is funny. I don't understand why you said that. I don't agree with what you're saying right now." And these really small acts are what we can do as allies, and these really small acts are basically the kind of change that we need to turn around the tide of what's happening right now. And so to those of you who are allies and to those in the community, I really hope that you're able to see people for who they are, and when they tell you who they are, listen and do what you can do and use your voice and use your privilege and use your power to take up space and to speak for people who may not be able to do that right now. And thank you very much to our speakers for coming out to Windsor on a very cold night. Thank you, guys.
Challenge heard and accepted, Emma. Our next speaker is Elizabeth Burrows. Most of you will know she represents Windsor 1, which includes West Windsor, Heartland, and Windsor, and she served on the local school board and has alternated service as chair and member of the new Mount Scottney School District Board each year since its inception. Elizabeth has worked towards dismantling systemic racism and other exclusionary biases beginning at our state's schools. It was that was a powerful impetus in her running for the State House and being elected. Elizabeth celebrates diversity of all sorts for its crucial benefits toward creativity and collaboration, and strives to institutionalize inclusion. So Elizabeth, I know you've brought someone with you, and we're glad you're here.
Thank you. I have been invited. Can you hear me? Okay. I've been invited to speak, but I am not going to say very much because I think it's really important to amplify the voices of people who have direct experience here and not listen to me blather on. So first of all, I just want to say Club Q 2 years, and I want to say thank you for inviting me to be here. Thank you, Windsor JEDI, and for inviting me to be part of this really super important event, but also, even more importantly, for hosting this. My own heart really aches today for a host of reasons, but that feeling is also combined with a roiling spirit of readiness. But tonight mine is with all heavy hearts as we remember those who didn't make it today, those whose stories ended just as they were living their best lives, or just as they were living best lives or forging new paths, or couldn't see a way through the hatred around them. What I want you to hear from me is that I will do and am doing every single thing that I can to protect the lives and well-being of our transgender community for those with us and for those no longer with us. May their lives lost amplify our dim little lights. And I just want to ask briefly everyone here to raise your hand if you are also here to be called upon in the darkest hours ahead. Those hands and the candles are dim lights in the darkness, brighter when we're together and ready to remember, rejoice, love, and fight when called upon. As I said, I'm keeping my marks very brief because I want to raise the voices that are much more important than mine. So thank you for taking this moment to stay in the loss and to find meaning together. And I'd like to introduce a very important person, an inspiration for me every single day, Jessi Burrows.
Hang on, I'm just pulling it up. Okay. First of all, hi.
Hi.
If you don't know, I am Jessi. I'm awfully tall. There we go. Much better. Thank you very much.
Hang on, let me get down here.
Yeah, good. So, all right. So, if you don't know, I am Jessi Burrows. I am transgender, and if you don't know, a little while ago, one of my dear friends I lost to suicide. She was of my age. She had autism as well. She loved music, and yes, she too was transgender. She loved writing music and poetry and would share them with me often. One of her poems was titled November, and it was my personal favorite. They captured the essence of what it means to be torn with yourself. Her name was Allie. Allie was very smart. She knew 3 languages apart from English: Vietnamese, Navajo, and of course, French. She would sometimes switch between the 3 and see if I could tell the difference between them, and I could. She would write a lot. Many of her characters and settings were genius allegories for complex topics. Her ability to weave words together and throw them at your heart was one of her marvelous talents. All of these things were wonderful qualities about her and would be for any person, but I fear that everything that people will remember is that she was transgender, as if that's a defining characteristic of her, as if that is the only thing she will be remembered by, is the part of the sickening 32% of individuals that are transgender that end up killing themselves. Following the election of Donald Trump, she called me in hysterics. I unfortunately didn't know how to help, as I was just as panicked and confused as her. But I thought that I got her through it. We had a very long talk about suicide, and I would always say, if we died, if I killed myself, or if you did, we would just become a statistic. I'm not going to tell you why she did it, because I myself don't know. It might be the fact that she didn't have a great relationship with her parents, or you can pin it on anything, but truly, we will never know the answer. And maybe she just felt alone. But again, we did not know the answer. And that is what I fear for her and what I fear for every person here. When I and her loved ones see a poet, a musician, a daughter, a friend, a writer, an artist, others will just see a statistic that will be used in different vectors of attack against us. So here I am asking you all to remember her, not because she is trans, but because she is an artist, because she is a poet, a musician, because she is beautiful, because she has tenderly healed the hearts of many without realizing it, because she would close her eyes when she laughs, but squint slightly to see if you are laughing with her. I will ask you, dear trans folks in the audience, when this whole thing is over, to go home and live. Cry and hurt and feel broken, but if you must, Do anything to cope with it, but God damn it, live. Even if it is the worst pain you have ever experienced. There is no greater show of solidarity, no greater show of willpower and tenacity than to keep living in a world that is closing in upon you. You cannot become a statistic. I will not let you. Do not let yourself add to the ever-increasing number that is held over our heads. Live, God damn it, live.
A member of the Greater Windsor community through his former work as a 5th grade teacher at Windsor School and his current work, thank God, at Hartford Elementary School as a social emotional interventionist. His partner Paige currently works as a 2nd grade teacher at Windsor School. Josh began his own transition 11 years ago at the end of 2013 and has spoken at quite a few events and panels. He lives in Claremont with Paige and their 5-year-old foster son, and we're really grateful that you're here tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here as we mourn the tragic loss of life of those in our community. So as was just said, my name is Joshua Lambert. I am an out and proud transgender man who has been transitioning for 11 years now. And I must say this day never gets easier, but I wanted to speak a bit on the reasons why we gather each year to recognize this day. It is a day of solemn reflection and profound emotion, where we come together as a community to honor the lives of transgender individuals who have been lost to violence. We pause to remember those who, in their pursuit of living their truth, were met with hatred, discrimination, and brutality. As we gather here today, we are bound by a collective grief, but also by an unwavering commitment to ensuring that their stories are not forgotten. We remember them not just as victims, but as people with dreams, aspirations, families, and futures that were unjustly cut short. We use this moment to reaffirm our dedication to the ongoing fight for justice, equality, and the fundamental human right to live authentically, free from violence and fear. I did add a little tidbit about Gwendolyn Smith and Rita Hester, but that was already talked about, so I'm just going to go into the words that I found from Gwendolyn Smith that really hold true to me. She stated, "Transgender Day of Remembrance seeks to highlight the losses we face due to anti-transgender bigotry and violence. I am no stranger to the need to fight for our rights, and the right to simply exist is first and foremost. With so many seeking to erase transgender people, sometimes in the most brutal ways possible, it is vitally important that those we lose are remembered and that we continue to fight for justice." End quote. These words sparked something in me, especially given the results of the latest election. I won't stand up here and say that nothing is going to change under this new administration, because we all know there's a strong possibility that some things will change for us, and not for the better. We are headed into what could potentially be some very dark times. However, now is certainly not the time to give up on the fight for our rights. A lot of what may happen in the next 4 years will come down to the states, and as Vermonters, you're fairly lucky in who you have as a governor. He may be a Republican on paper, but for the most part, he supports the trans community in protecting access to gender-affirming care and protecting us as people who we are. I can't say the same about our new governor across the river. I foresee it getting really tough over there over the course of the next 4 years. But back to why we gather on this day. The primary reason we gather is to remember those who we've lost over the course of the year due to violence and hatred, whether they be trans, non-binary, or other gender-diverse identities. We remember their names and continue to fight for our rights and for them so their deaths weren't in vain. We recognize that senseless cruelty and violence is still happening in our communities and raise awareness about the need to protect ourselves, whatever that means for you. Personally, I like to live out and proud as someone who is fairly protected here in the Northeast, but that might change given the current circumstances. I do worry that I may not be able to be so open soon for fear of retribution by those who wish us harm. So protection may mean different things to different people, but I do encourage you all to protect yourselves in a way that feels most comfortable to you. It is also important to remember that the violence we see against transgender people is not an isolated issue. It is deeply intertwined with the same societal forces that perpetuate racism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, and xenophobia. In order to create lasting change, we must address these intersecting systems of oppression and work to dismantle them all. The struggle for transgender rights is not separate from the struggle for racial justice, for women's rights, for the rights of disabled people, for immigrant rights, and for the rights of all marginalized communities. It is part of a shared fight for dignity, respect, and the affirmation of our humanity. I can't recall how many times I've spoken to a crowd on this day, but regardless, I always feel sadness. Sadness that I wish we could do more to prevent this violence. Sadness that we lose so many beautiful souls to senseless cruelty. Sadness that the violence has unfortunately happened here in the Northeast. But with that said, speaking also gives me hope. Hope that one day we won't have to live in fear, but in true pride. Hope that we'll see more transgender or gender nonconforming politicians being elected to all levels of offices. Shout out to Sarah McBride for just becoming the first openly trans individual elected to Congress. And in the end, hope that Transgender Day of Remembrance can someday become a thing of the past because the violence directed at our community will end. As we honor the memory of those we have lost, we must also acknowledge the incredible resilience and strength of the transgender community. Though we face immense challenges, we continue to fight for visibility, recognition, and justice. We continue to rise even when we are knocked down, and we continue to build spaces of love, support, and safety for each other. Transgender people have always been at the forefront of movements for equality, from Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera's pioneering work during the Stonewall uprisings to the advocacy of transgender leaders today. The transgender community has long been a force for positive change. We have been resilient in the face of adversity, and we have shown that our voices matter. The stories of our lost siblings, the bravery of those who are still with us, and the advocacy of transgender leaders all remind us that, despite the violence we face, we will not be erased. We will continue to show up, to fight, to love, and to live with dignity. So there is hope. It may seem quite bleak now, but there is hope, and there is a need to fight now more than ever. We must fight to protect access to gender-affirming care, including for our younger transhumans. We must fight for young trans athletes who wish to play sports they love as their authentic selves. We must fight to protect the opportunities to change our personal identification documents to reflect our true selves. And we must fight for any and all rights that cisgender individuals have that we are being denied. When I sat down to write this speech, I wasn't exactly sure what I would say, but I think the overall message I wanted to convey is that we can't give up under these new circumstances. If anything, we need to work harder. We need to be there for each other. We need to survive, even if out of spite, because our lives matter. The names we'll read today are not just statistics. They are the faces of our friends, our loved ones, our sisters, brothers, and non-binary siblings. They are people who loved and laughed, who had hopes for the future, who faced challenges with resilience, and who experienced joys like all of us. But their stories ended too soon, often because of senseless acts of violence driven by ignorance, hatred, or fear. This year, like every year, the number of transgender individuals whose lives have been taken is staggering. But behind every number is a person with a story, an individual who left a unique mark on the world. We honor them by remembering who they were, not just how they died. To those we have lost, we hold you in our hearts. You are not forgotten in life, and you will not be forgotten in death. You deserve to be remembered with love, dignity, and respect. As we close later today, let us hold the names of those we have lost in our hearts. Let us remember that every life lost is a reminder of the work that remains. And let us promise to keep fighting, not just for today, but for a future where all transgender people can live without fear, without violence, and with the full recognition of their humanity. Thank you.
So we're really grateful. You're gonna have to really lift this high. That Grace could be with us tonight. Grace Alden is a writer, a public speaker, an athlete, a mother, a wife, and a feminist.
Hello, everyone. I would like to thank our organizers for bringing this together. Thank you for creating this space. And thank you particularly for the people who are here doing security, circulating among us and around the perimeter. I am grateful for your presence and the work that you are doing. So, here we are, we who are still alive. In the days and years to come, we will fight more effectively if we learn from those who fought before us. Holocaust survivors, some of whom were queer, some of whom we would now call trans, many who weren't. Black Americans, First Peoples of all kinds, American or not, Russian dissenters. I could go on. Those who have fought have valuable lessons to teach us. And one of those lessons is, don't obey in advance. They wish that we did not exist, and so they try to erase us. And they can do it to an extent. The Nazis did. Those famous pictures of that big pile of books burning, those books, that paper, came from the Institute of Sexual Research. The first of its kind in the Western world, created to understand human beings who were not heteronormative. They killed a lot of us, and they forced a lot of us into hiding. But we are still here, the rest of us, because we spring up naturally as children, as part of the glorious range of humans. We are simply some of the many ways to be human. And so we will always be part of a whole humanity. They didn't kill all of us. Some of us are still here. They wanted to eradicate us, and we made them work for it, and sometimes we win. TDORR, Trans Day of Remembrance and Resilience, is traditionally about the murdered, about those killed by others. But right now, they are feeling the intoxication of their 49% electoral win. We have our first openly trans representative in the U.S. House, and they're gunning for her already. I feel the necessity of recognizing that some of us aren't murdered. Some of us are hounded until we kill ourselves. And that's what they want. Don't obey in advance. My existence, your existence, is an affront to them. And every day that we are alive, and especially every day that we are joyful, is a defiant triumph for us. Don't do their work for them. Don't obey in advance. Strive. Live. And learn from those who have fought. Mother Jones said, "Mourn the dead and fight like hell for the living." So we fight. And we mourn, which is what brings us together now. I have learned a lot from people of color, and among them James Baldwin. Bigotry is intersectional, and so it is altogether right and proper that I, a white trans woman, should learn something about myself from a gay person of color. Applying his words to my own life, let me paraphrase him. I know what the world has done to my siblings and how narrowly they have survived it, those who have. And I know, which is much worse, and this is the crime of which I accuse my country and my countrymen, that they have destroyed and are destroying hundreds of thousands of lives and do not know it and do not want to know it. It is not tolerable that the authors of devastation should also be innocent. It is the innocence which constitutes the crime. So thank you, all of you here, for coming to this event. In doing that, you have taken a step away from the innocence which constitutes the crime. When I helped to host a TDOR event years ago in a church I was a member of at the time, we read the full list the international list, hundreds of names. And one of the participants asked, why are so many of the names from Brazil? And I replied, because someone in Brazil is paying attention and counting. That's why TDORR exists. Gwen Smith and Nancy Nangeroni and others saw how easily our deaths were forgotten even amongst ourselves. They came to understand that trans people were so marginalized, so unthought of, so outlawed from polite society, that when we died, even in hundreds, even in thousands, no one understood that these deaths were a pattern. Gender diverse people died as individuals, generally alone and in terror. And each death was an isolated tragedy. And then their deaths were often erased as their blood relatives, who had refused to know them in life, took over after death and buried them under the names they had explicitly rejected. It isn't until you read their actual names that you hear that most of them are women, and most of them are women of color, and most of them are from the South. Alone, we are anomalies, but together, in the aggregate, we are silent testimony to the intersection of misogyny, racism, and poverty. But we read the names. Each name gets a moment, regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of wealth. TDOR exists in part to say, we are dying. Not you and I, we. TDOR is trans and gender diverse people coming together and asserting community, even across artificial societal boundaries. And cis allies coming into community with us to bear witness, to mourn with us, and to acknowledge their community with us, even as, for this brief time, it is we who are centered and not they. Because the other part of TDOR is even simpler. Right now, all of you here are participating in a memorial service. Whatever form it takes, at root, TDOR is a memorial event. Why else do we read out the names, those murdered, who can no longer assert their names against the relentless, concussive blows of the societies that would rather kill us than admit the reality of our existence? Societies which would rather cling to a false simplicity than embrace the largest, most profound simplicity, that we are all human, and that we all have inherent worth and dignity, and that every detail after that is situational and routinely less important than we were taught. So on TDOR, we say their names. And in saying their names, we claw away the innocence which constitutes the crime.
So you are all invited to take a candle. And to observe kind of the light being passed from one to the other. Transquality.org suggested there were 113 trans sisters and brothers that we have lost since November of 23. 43 were killed, 24 were suicides, and we could add Allie tonight. But we know those numbers are hugely underreported or misreported. And so I love that we were told to not let innocence continue to be the crime. And we were encouraged to live, God damn it, to live. And so there is something about simply gathering in this small square on the east side of Vermont on the Connecticut River to hold a memorial service for most of these names we don't know personally, and yet all of these names we do in fact know. So recognizing that this is just a part of those beloved and beautiful souls that have passed through the veil this last year, hear these names. Kitty Monroe, 43 years old, from Phoenix, Arizona. A Latina woman who was known for her fashion sense and loving, protective nature. She was the first known victim of fatal transphobic violence in 2024. Sasha Williams, 36, from Las Vegas. A hair, nail, and makeup artist who was a generous and loving friend. Africa Paria Garcia, 25, from San Juan, Puerto Rico. Righteous Torrance T.K. Hill, 35, in Atlanta, a black trans man who owned a popular hair salon, which was a safe haven for the black queer community. Reina Hernandez, 54, from Renton, Washington. Diamond Cherish Bridgman, 36, from Houston. Alex Boo Taylor Franco, 21, from Salt Lake City. Meraxis Medina, 24, from Los Angeles. A talented makeup artist at Universal Studios, beloved by her friends, who said she left an impression on everyone. She had this aura about her, and everywhere we went, people would turn around. Yella Clark, 45. River Navia Goddard, 17, from Stowe, Massachusetts. T. Arnold, 36, from Hollandale Beach, Florida. Star Brown, Raleigh, Tennessee. a black trans woman who was described as a beautiful soul, of course, by her friends. Andrea Doria Dos Passos, 37, Miami Beach. Keita B., 46, Kansas City, Missouri. She had endured periods of housing instability, but still served as a mentor to other trans women in her community. Her friends say she had a very sweet soul. Jaslyn Johnson, 18, Carson City, Nevada. Tay Dior Thomas, 17, Mobile, Alabama. Tay was known as a kind and giving person. Family and friends said they hope for changes in Alabama's hate crimes law, which does not cover crimes motivated by the victim's sexual orientation or gender identity. Michelle Henry, 25. She had been involved in the San Francisco LGBT Center's youth program, where the director said Michelle was a ray of light for our team. Her warmth and presence were felt in every room she walked in. She was kind, deeply caring, courageous, and fearless. Liara Kaylee Tsai, 35, Minneapolis. Liara was a DJ, producer, combat veteran, spoken word artist, also a volunteer crisis counselor with the Trevor Project. Polly Likens, 14 years old. Sharon, Pennsylvania. A selfless, loving child who loved nature, getting her nails done, and shopping. She aspired to be a park ranger like her Aunt Liz. Kenji Spurgeon, 23, Seattle, Washington. Friends say Kenji was a bright light in our lives, known for an infectious smile and a quick wit. Shannon Boswell, 31, Atlanta. Dylan Gurley, 20, Denton, Texas. Tavian Lathan, 24. Kasim Omar, 29. Red, 25, known as Barbie to her friends. Red was remembered as a kind and loving person. Honey Daniels, 37. Monique Brooks, 49, from Orlando, Florida. Monique was remembered as a beloved friend and activist within the local trans community. She was involved with Divas in Dialogue, a sisterhood of transgender women of color seeking to empower, build, and strengthen each other and the community. Vanity Williams, 34, an Air Force veteran who had recently begun nursing school with the goal of opening a medical spa. Sam Coleman, 48, killed in Atlanta. Ty Lathan, 24, killed in Baltimore. Vanity Chanel Williams, 34, killed in Houston. So we take just a few minutes to feel that cloud of witnesses that we've lost, whose spirit reach across to make us laugh and cry and encourage us forward day by day. Remember these beloveds. So this small act of revolutionary love on this year's Transgender Day of Remembrance is, in fact, an act of revolutionary love. So live, God damn it. Live. Moira is so good about details that I forget the chair of our Jedi, who just wants to remind you of two things.
Thank you very much for coming out tonight. Tonight we have a page of QR codes. You can donate to Trans Justice Funding Project, Trans Lifeline, Transgender Law Center. If you scan these with your phone, it will come up and take you right to the page where you can donate. Those are up on the table up front. We also have, if you or anyone you know needs help, we have the LGBTQ+ support hotlines and resources. This is put together by Aaron Almanza from the LGBT National Hotline. And those are also right up here. So with that, thank you for coming out tonight, and have a good night. Thank you.